Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. Stories, tools, and wisdom shared by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence and release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's show. Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. This is Hugh Ballou. I'm the founder and president of an organization that creates synergy from our vision. So I called it CenterVision Leadership Foundation. I have a special guest today who we've just met, but I'm so impressed. Noel Massie, would you tell people a little bit about you and your background and your passion? Our topic today is the terms and conditions of value-based leadership, but tell people about Noel first.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm privileged to be on your show today with you and your listeners, and I think we're going to have a great time over the next few minutes talking about leadership and some of my thoughts on it. I started with UPS in the late '70s, so I had 42 years with the organization, and I grew up in the Bay Area, California, Oakland. I went to San Jose State University, and actually, the way I ended up in my career at UPS was as a college student, electrical engineering student at San Jose State. And at that time, I was paying for my tuition. The systems we have today didn't exist so much then, so I had to work my way through college, which I appreciate, and that was instilled in me by my family. My grandfather was a great influence in my life. He was a barber, and actually in my book I talk about his influence on many aspects of leadership and values. But that being said, that's how I started my journey at UPS, and I went into the management ranks as I was about to graduate college in 1980, and the company was privately owned, and that's important. It was founded in 1907 by a great individual named James E. Casey, and he built a privately owned supply chain company unlike any other in the world. And it was successful, in my view, because Jim was a value based leader. He was a servant leader, and that organization went from a bicycle messenger service in 1907 Seattle to 500,000 people today for one reason and one reason alone. And that was his expectation around leadership, values. And I'll talk about that, as we get in our discussion. I won't do that now, but I went into the management ranks in 1980 as a supervisor. And then I became a manager in the mid 80s with about 400 or 500 employees under me at the age of 26. Think about that. And then at the age of 30, I became a division mid level manager with about 12, 1,300 people. And then in the mid 90s, I was transferred to Philadelphia with my wife and two sons, and I became the COO there. And then that took me to 97, where I was promoted to a president's level position. And my first president's assignment was Northern Indiana and Illinois, right? Chicago being the anchor. And from Chicago, we went to Virginia for a couple years. And then we landed back in California, but in the South, Southern California, because Northerners, I said I was from the Bay Area, we see the southern part of the state in a very different way than most people. But it was a great experience in Southern California. We were there really the longest, for about a decade. And then actually at that point in my career, I was thinking about chapter two, and the CEO of the organization asked if I would not do that, and I became U.S. Operations Vice President for all delivery operations with about 180,000 employees in it or so, and 12 to 20,000 management folks, give or take. And I know that's a wide gap, but 12,000 are supervisors, the rest are support staff. So as I was exiting the organization, I had actually been thinking about writing the book I wrote for about a decade. And I knew that once I retired, which I did in 2019, that I was going to write a book for leadership, especially leaders in that first 5 year period. And I say that because during my first 5 years, they were probably the most formative years of my leadership journey. That's when you learn and you go through the school of hard knocks. And that's actually where the biggest derailment component of a leadership journey happens, is in that first few years. And so I wanted to write a book to serve that particular group of people as training budgets were being cut because I was having that issue as well as a lot of my peer president and general managers in other companies. That training budgets were being cut, and there wasn't a lot of content for newly promoted leaders out there. And so that's where my book aims is small business owners, newly promoted leaders, etc. But that's a little bit about who I am, and I currently sit on 4 nonprofit boards. And
Love it, love it, love it. Now, what I know, excuse me to interrupt you, I want to get in a couple of good points here. So this isn't about, we think about corporate America as a separate thing, but really the expertise, the experience, and the insights you have are about systems and leadership, the influence of a leader. And you and I talked a little bit before we went live about my background as a conductor. And you can hear an orchestra play a piece of music with one conductor, and you can hear another orchestra play the same piece of music, a different conductor, and they could be amazingly different. One
yeah,
comes alive and one just gets the job done. So the influence of a leader, what I like to say is what we get as conductors is what they see. So the reflection of the lead of the culture is the leader is in the culture, really.
that's
So
right.
you talked a little bit about that, but basically, what your book is for those people you mentioned, but I want to suggest it's also for all these 1.5 million plus nonprofit leaders that many are newly promoted. They just don't
Right.
think of themselves that way. So talk about the position of leader and influence, and then talk about, we're social entrepreneurs. We're leading for the first time. So I think this is very relevant for our audience. What do you think?
So you struck a couple of really important points just now that individuals in leadership are better served when they understand it. And that is that leadership is one thing and one thing alone. It's the ability to influence an individual or a group of people to a desired outcome. And obviously that desired outcome should be one that's positive and seeking excellence in some way, shape, or form, whether it's as a conductor or whether you're running a tech company. At the end of the day, leadership is not rocket science, but it is a science. And people respond to certain things that leaders produce. If you watch coaches, because leadership is coaching and it's development, is they spend most of their time in the development arena. I mean, once the symphony starts or the game's being played, they're going to reflect what you've developed them to be, right? And so leadership is about engaging with individuals under you in a developmental way. And that's something I learned over many, many years is that if you are going to influence individuals, then they need to believe that you believe in them. And they need to see that you're willing to invest in them. And I always would say this to my managers, and I had under me CFOs, directors of HR, directors of engineering. I had people that were highly professional individuals, and my job with that group was to coach them. That was my role with them, was to be their coach. Even Michael Jordan had a coach. Okay. And I would say that to them is that no one's ever above coaching. And when you think you're above coaching, you need to look in the mirror because the problem is going to be the person looking back at you telling you think you've arrived. No one ever arrives in leadership. It just doesn't happen ever in a career. So feedback is really important, especially for business owners and high level leaders, because they don't get a lot of feedback, right? Generally, the feedback they get is situational based on a moment. But leadership is coaching, and it's the ability to influence a group or an individual towards outcomes. And so in my book, I talk a lot about that with the new leader. And I do it in a number of dimensions. But the most important thing I want them to understand is their primary role is making people under them better at what it is they do.
Oh, that's a sound bite you can write down. So, folks, if you think stuff's going by too fast, do not worry. There's going to be a full transcript, and you can find it at nonprofitexchange.org, O-R-G. So this episode will be there by this title. Speaking of the book, I bet you have a copy of the book you can show us.
Yes, I do actually. Here's a copy of the book. Tyler,
Congrats.
congrats, you've been promoted.
Uh-huh.
Your guide for new leaders in their teams.
So, frame that, as I had suggested earlier, frame that. You've been on boards, you've been president of boards, and you have to work with the executive director. Have to. It's your honor. It's
Yeah.
the, it's the routine. The executive director serves at the pleasure of the board. So, knowing that information and having all the experience you talked about with a company that's very focused on development and systems, that's how they're so efficient all the time. So, position what you talk about in the book for these nonprofit leaders. Why are these messages important? They didn't just get promoted, but maybe they did. So, why are these important to these leaders?
The most important thing a leader must understand is where the group of people they are leading are, right? What development level, because all things aren't created the same. I mean, one board may be very experienced, have a lot of depth in leadership, and another may not so much, a lot of new people, etc. So the most important thing is a value-based congruence must emerge. What is important to us when it comes to our personal values? What matters? And those things can't be left to chance. Intentional leadership means you have the ability to articulate what's important to the team or organization, which is why I talk about in the book a phrase I use throughout the book, and it's really the foundation, it's the keystone of the book, is the phrase terms and conditions. And I'll tell you where that came from. So I had an experience as I was ideating this book over a decade ago that was very negative with regard to an automobile warranty I have, right? And so while I was on the phone, they had denied like 3 repairs or something. And while I was on the phone talking to the warranty company, I had bought an extended warranty for my vehicle. The guy talking to me says, "Well, sir, turn to page 11 and look at the bottom. You see the fine print? You see the terms and conditions at the bottom?" And at that moment, I promptly hung up the phone. Okay. And then they called me back and were begging me to renew, and I wasn't gonna. But the point is I was already ideating the book on another platform, and I was like, "That's exactly right." So I began framing the term inside my content, as well as I was still in my professional role. And I was like, that's right. Everyone has terms and conditions. Human beings have them. And if I were to say to you or your listeners, I want you to write down 5 things that are critical in a relationship you have with someone else. What matters? And, it's easy. Most people, I can do this blind. Most people write down respect, trust, listening, loyalty, meaning commitment. Most people write down those things as terms and conditions. And so leaders need to understand that in groups, those exist, right? Those exist. And when you don't, and they do with individuals as well, even more actually, that those exist. And when you bring someone in your organization, they have terms and conditions. And as with a warranty, if you don't adhere to those, it won't be satisfied. If you want a great person working for you, then there are things you must do to get that. All right. And those are the terms and conditions. Employees don't sell you their dignity. They don't sell you their respect. It's not hard. There's no gray. There's either respect or disrespect. That's how the world works. And so the foundation of the book throughout talks about the terms and conditions of value-based leadership. It talks about it in a deep way because I want stickiness, right? So and that's what I've actually gotten from people that have read the book is when they walk away, they go, the one thing, Noel, that I will never forget is that people have terms and conditions. And as a leader, I must recognize and acknowledge them to build a high performing team. Exactly. So that's one of the most important points I'd like your listeners to hear is that congruence comes from establishing that foundation with your team. And an example of that is in our group, we're going to have integrity. If it's not right, we're not doing it. Okay. I just want everybody to understand that's important to us. We're going to be ethical. Okay. We're never going to take advantage of any human being, and we're going to have honorable conduct towards others, which is the definition of ethics. Integrity involves you. Ethics means you include other people. So we're going to be an ethical group. Listening. And one of the things I talk about in the book, Hugh, is listening a skill or a value? If you think about that for a minute, what is it? Is it a skill or a value? And the answer to the test is it's both. We listen to people we value. And I make that point deeply in the book is that when we don't value people, and if you're a leader and you don't value an employee, there's going to be a moment where they're trying to communicate with you and you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. And it's going to be important because things are going fast, bombs are going off. So in that particular chapter, I go, hey, listen, as a leader, when someone's saying, hey, Hugh, do you have a minute? There's a technique I give them. Stop, pause, and listen. And that means stop, turn the phone off, tell people, excuse me, and you look the person dead square in the eye and go, how can I help you? Because one of those times they're going to tell you something that's going to dramatically impact your business or your life potentially. So stop, pause, and listen is a skill. And that's something I really pound on in the book about listening being a skill or a value. So in our team, we are going to stop, pause, and listen when someone is speaking. We're not going to talk over them. Those are intentional leadership values. And when you build that congruence in your team and you take leadership learning as a primary focus of who you are, things get way better fast.
There's multiple, thank you for that, it's brilliant. There's multiple words for time in Greek in our scripture. And chronos is, we're so focused on the chronological things we got to do that we forget the kairos moments. And that is a kairos moment where your attention needs to be full on.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the most valuable things I learned in coaching school was listening, the pause, look, silence afterwards, the listening, which is the same skill I learned in conducting school. You know, if you're not actively listening for content, for context, if you're listening for to respond, that's wrong. That is so helpful. So psychiatrist Mary Bowen went from from his psychiatry business. I'm struggling for the word therapy to leadership. He has 8 concepts of leadership,
Yep.
and he speaks very eloquently about guiding principles. In his world, you're defining how do you set a context for principle-based leadership. So the principles are based on the values, like integrity. You probably got 10 people and there's 11 definitions of it. So how do you get people on the same page with the meaning of those values? How do you help them understand it and articulate it to make decisions together?
I give some really, I think, powerful examples in the book of real life circumstances that I saw individuals encounter with regard to each one of those values. You know, ethics, integrity, fairness. I talk about that, and I tell stories to bring life to the moment, so that it helps the reader ride along in the discussion in a way where when they get there, they have the appropriate aha. And I said ethics is the honorable conduct towards others. That means you know when you're dishonorable. Everyone does. And the fact of the matter is there's no secret to what these behaviors really look like. You know, and in seminars, when I've asked young people to raise their hand to give a definition, who wants to give a definition of integrity? They'll go moral, character, and etc. I said, at the end of the day, it means you don't lie, cheat, and steal. Right, ever, right? You don't deceive people ever, right? That you have integrity. I said it's like, and I give an example of why it matters in leadership, but I actually use structural integrity as an example of this, to be candid, because that's exactly what it is. And that's what I found when I was leader of 100 something thousand people, right? I couldn't talk to that many people. I had to rely on leaders under me to do it, right? So I had to be able to communicate values in a way that suggested here's how we're going to behave. When we had a flood in an area and we couldn't access it, and there were hospitals and nursing homes that were counting on us to get to their front door because we had all of their supplies and medications. My number one important place to start always was on employee safety. Always. Is that if it's not safe, don't enter the environment. If it's not appropriate, don't do it. We're going to have integrity with our people. So no, we're not going to get it done at all costs because that means we're willing to let someone die or get hurt. No, that's not okay. Okay, we have integrity in what we're asking people to do. And so I would give them examples, but in the book I talk about structural integrity, and I give the example of the bridge that collapsed in Minnesota, as well as a condominium that collapsed in Florida. I said, listen, those people were in that condominium, they were asleep, and it collapsed, and a bunch of them died. But when the investigation happened, there were tons of engineers that had signed off on the structural integrity of that building. They said it was okay. All right. So what went on trial wasn't the building, it was the engineers, right? Because what they did lacked integrity in saying the building had integrity. When a person's in a leadership role, your people are trusting that you have the strength of character to always be honest, truthful, and trustworthy with them. Always. Not when it's comfortable, not when it's convenient, but always. So I give some examples of what leadership integrity looks like by using some structural examples because that's exactly right. If I were to get on a call with, 3,000 managers and go, we got to get this done at all costs, that turns into stuff, okay, is what happens. Okay. But if they hear me say, no, we're going to do everything with safety as the primary objective. Everyone's going to go home tonight that came in today. That becomes important. That's what integrity is. In ethics, I give an example. And actually, when I was a kid, I worked in my grandfather's barber shop. He was a barber. And I learned a lot in that barber shop. And I was like 7 years old, sweeping hair, right? And I grew up, 10, 12, listening to a million stories. I tell this one story when it comes to ethics that one Saturday I'm sweeping hair and these two guys are sitting on the bench waiting for their hair to be cut, but they're laughing. They're friends. And my grandfather, it was a community barbershop, so he knew everyone. That's how that works, right? So in any event, these two guys are talking, and my grandfather, if nothing, was a very ethical man. I never saw him get angry once. I'm not embellishing that, but I saw him make a point a lot of times, very quietly with people. So these two guys are talking, and one of them goes, "Whew, I dodged a bullet." Another guy goes, "What? What happened?" He goes, "I sold that Buick, and the engine was about to go out. My mechanic told me in 2 months, but I got like 3 grand for that thing." And they were laughing. And my grandfather stopped cutting hair in the middle of cutting hair. And he looks at them and he goes, listen, what you did was wrong. And what comes around goes around. And so that's not honorable conduct what that guy did. That was unethical, even though it wasn't illegal. Because just because something's legal doesn't make it ethical. And that's an actual chapter component, or not a chapter, but it's a subsection in the book. Just because it's legal doesn't make it ethical. And in that case, I give that example as well as a number of others in business that highlight
Love it.
the point.
Love it. Love it. Noel, we could talk all day. This is so much more in your book. We're just going to give people the tip of the iceberg so they want to go to noelmassie.com and see about you. So when they get there, they see your smiling face, teach, empower, lead, and they also see, you can get the book here. What else would they find on your website? Now, tell people there's people listening and not watching, so describe what people will see when they get there.
Well, you see where it says learn more, there's some other content. The masterclass, I built a 9-episode masterclass that the things you're hearing me talk about right now are in that, very vividly so, right? So everything I'm saying here is in the masterclass. I talk about integrity, ethics, trust.
Hmm.
There's methods. Part 2 of the book is tactical. It's the 4x5 method. So it's not just conversation. There's a how to apply these things that become challenging for new leaders. Like the 4x5 method really is a tactic or technique that a leader can use in a hot moment, right? Because that's what happens. Someone's coming at you. You didn't see it coming. How do you de-escalate it and turn it into a win-win? The 4x5 method takes you there. It's a skill technique. 7 steps of effective training. Listen, today I'm going to teach you how to drive a forklift. The 7 steps of effective training is a technique that gives you a very high retention rate. And I learned these things over 30 years from a number of curriculum-based and things that I was engaged in. So they're tactical approaches for leaders to be able to use when all of a sudden they're asking Bob to drive truck number 8, and Bob goes, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not driving truck number 8." Okay, and the leader is 27 and Bob's 60, right? In an intimidating moment. I want the new leader or the leader to understand in that moment, just like if you were driving a car and you had been taught how to drive tactically, you know how to swerve and avoid a collision. I teach that in the 4x5 method. When that moment happens, you know how to grab that moment without a collision. You can see the signs. You know,
Um,
and I tell leaders that signs show, and you see the signs you want to see. But when people have a reaction to anything you say, it's just like if you were in a car, there'd be hazard signs, stop signs, warning signs. And when you see a hazard sign and you're driving, you slow down. Because if you don't, potential hazard, right? Well, people are the same way. They will be flashing hazard signs. And if you don't slow down, you're going to crash. Okay. So I talk about it that way, very tangibly about how to see the signs. And when you see them, what tactic fits the moment.
So no, I've been leader for 78 years, most of them actually 70, because I started my work when I was 8. I've been working with leaders. I learned a lot of things today. Brilliant stuff. You're very articulate, very precise, and inspirational. So we've come to the end of this precious time together. What one thought, just like a quick thought, you want to leave people with today?
There's two. So I'm a cheat. The first one is I want to really emphasize that individuals have terms and conditions. The way you know what those are is you get to know them. You take over a group, it's got 12 people in it. Here's what you need to schedule: 12 meetings for at least 30 minutes, 12 cups of coffee. And they need to know they matter to you. And you think about when you met your spouse's parents the first time, or you applied for a house, you did everything you could to put your best foot forward. Well, when someone gives you responsibility with a team, you need to put your best foot forward. And they need to know in the introduction, it shouldn't take 6 months. It should be immediately, right? Nice to meet you, Hugh. My role is to help develop you to be the best Hugh you can be in our organization. Tell me some of your thoughts. This is your time to talk to me, right? And then you need to establish the terms and conditions in that moment. Well, Hugh, I appreciate everything you said, but in our group, I just want everyone to know we will have integrity. We will have ethics. I will be fair. And if I'm not, I want to know about it. If you think that for a moment, that's where you establish that immediately. You don't wait. And then finally, I will say what that turns into, and I heard this quote from the great founder of UPS, James E. Casey, 40 years ago, and it's stuck. And it's actually had the most influence on my life and my family's life. And my sons would say this to you, that there's a basic premise in life. You can't hope to get more than you give, right? You can't hope to get more than you give, but people do, right? So if you're not giving to the things that are important to do, then why would you expect something in return? Meaning that if you're not giving to the people under you in development, why should you expect a return from them? It doesn't make sense. If you weren't saving money, go to a bank and ask them to give you a withdrawal. And then when they go, okay, so how much you got in here? Nothing. Right? Okay, you don't get to have money come out, right? You can't hope to give more than you give is a very simple concept that everyone can get their head around and say, if I want to be great at fishing, then what did I invest in doing that? If I want to be great at leadership, it's not rocket science, but it's a science. What did I invest in that? How did I invest in that? And you should wake up every day saying, the people under me, who am I going to develop today? And what investment in them am I going to make if I expect them to give effort? I want to leave your listeners with that.
Noel Massie, you are an inspiration. Thank you for an amazing interview today on the Nonprofit Exchange.
Hey, it was my pleasure to be with you. I enjoyed our conversation a lot. And, good luck to all your listeners in their leadership journeys.
Thank you for watching the Nonprofit Exchange.